Hi, this is the Movie Reviewers 100. I'm Jim Gisriel. I'm the guest contributor today. This week is Movies from the Year You Were Born week on the Movie Reviewers 100, and I chose to do Twilight Zone the movie from 1983, which was the year I was born. The reason I'm doing this is actually because of a Facebook conversation I had with CineRam from the Movie Reviewers 100 about anthology films, and I think I said I had never seen this film, but I'd always wanted to, and also Jared Weiss, who's a really great animator and filmmaker, and you should check out his film Transmissions. It's great. And CineRam, I'm assuming you know at this point, but you should check him out also. Not as much is said now about how much of an influence the Twilight Zone was on Steven Spielberg. He loved the Twilight Zone. He actually got to direct some Night Gallery episodes with Rod Sterling. I don't know if they met, or I assume maybe, possibly, or how much they worked together, but Steven Spielberg was incredibly influenced by the show. So it makes a lot of sense that he would want to produce with John Landis a Twilight Zone movie. And this was made for Warner Brothers. It had 4 different segments directed by 4 different directors: John Landis, Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, and George Miller. Now, Spielberg and Landis were more established at the time, whereas Dante and George Miller were the newer upstarts. The main thing that everyone takes away from it in every review I've read from the time was that the worst 2 segments are Spielberg and Landis, and the better 2 segments are Joe Dante and George Miller. And I actually agree. But I think what this anthology film's problem is that all of these, except for the first segment and the epilogue, are remakes of original Twilight Zone episodes, which kind of makes me think I wouldn't mind if someone just cut together all the Twilight Zone episodes and made a compilation movie. That might have, actually, I think that would have been a better movie. It's kind of more of a tribute film. I mean, sure, you have nicer cameras, nicer special effects, and things like that, but the storytelling's not really that much different or better. All of the segments that were remade are written by Richard Matheson, who Steven Spielberg is a big fan of, and actually he wrote the short story that he eventually turned into a screenplay for Steven Spielberg's first big movie, Duel, and he wrote some of the better Twilight Zone episodes, so it's no wonder he was such a fan of him. And the 3 that are remakes are written by him, but the first segment was written by John Landis, and it does have a Twilight Zone feel to it, and actually doesn't feel as off with the entire film. But it's interesting they chose not to go for another Matheson story and do something different. It feels like they didn't really plan this out, which I find with a lot of anthology films, especially when you have several directors working on one film. It's hard to get everyone to work together. The prologue, which is just Albert Brooks and Dan Aykroyd talking in a car, it's a cute little prologue, they move on. That's alright, I guess. Whatever, it's just a little dumb prologue. Then John Landis did a film with Vic Morrow. This part is kind of infamous because of a famous helicopter accident on set, which would go on for legal fights many, many years after this film was released. A man, Vic Morrow, who was passed up for a major promotion, and he gets more upset because the man was Jewish. Then he says some racist things, some things against Vietnamese people. He's bitching to his friends that, you know, all these races are ruining America, and then he leaves the bar and suddenly he's in Germany right before World War II with the Nazis, and they think he's Jewish. Then he's in the Deep South about to get lynched by the Klan, and then he goes to Vietnam. Originally, supposedly he gets his redemption by saving these 2 little girls from the US Army in Vietnam, but then since there was a helicopter accident, that was cut. So I'm not exactly sure what the original idea behind this story, because it ends in a way that makes me think, like, did they still have it end that way regardless? I mean, clearly they did, because they clearly shot that before Vic Morrow was killed in that helicopter accident. So I'm not exactly sure how all that went down and how they restructured it, and I'd kind of actually be curious to read about how they put that segment together. Apparently it was the first segment filmed. There was originally an idea to have a character going throughout every segment, but they dashed that, and apparently that might have been because of what happened while they were filming the first segment. I get the impression these weren't all shot at the same time. They were shot at various different times, and it all kind of just came together. This segment is alright. It's a well-made segment, but it's just so hammy with its comment on racism. It's too heavy-handed, too obvious, and just not really very good. I think it echoes a Twilight Zone segment, so that's alright. But the worst segment is Spielberg's segment, which is a remake of Kick the Can, which was a Twilight Zone episode, also written by Richard Matheson. Although he didn't write the original one, That was written by George Clayton Johnson. He helped rewrite it, I guess, with Melissa Matheson. He was involved anyway. It was probably the weakest segment. It was just a bunch of old people and then they wish they were younger. It kind of reminds me of Cocoon, which wouldn't come out until 2 years after this. It's not really as good as Cocoon. It's a little stupid. It's probably the worst shot of the entire 4 segments, which is surprising because out of the 4, if you were going to pick who's the best director and you hadn't seen this film, you'd go, oh, Spielberg segment's going to be amazing. And it's the worst segment. And if you could just cut out that segment, I think this film would be shorter and a lot better. And I think I would have liked it a lot more. Apparently Spielberg actually put this in the order of excitement, which I kind of agree with, except for his, which is like not exciting at all. It's just old people become young. The first segment was actually kind of exciting. It was heavy-handed and not the greatest written, but it was semi-exciting. This was really dull. It reminded me of the worst parts of Amazing Stories. His form of nostalgia, especially at this time, feels very hammy, kind of like he views everything with rose-tinted glasses, and it's like the 50s and the 40s were this idyllic time. Not the intelligent filmmaker you get from things of his feature films. He looks like kind of everything you dislike about Spielberg is on display in this film, and it's not exciting, which is something I would really expect from Spielberg in this time period. It was very disappointing. The next segment, which is Joe Dante's It's a Good Life, which is a remake, was rewritten by Richard Matheson, but it was based on a George Bixby short story, and it was one of the better Twilight Zone episodes, and probably one of the more famous ones. And the cool thing about this is Joe Dante definitely, and the writers, took a different approach to it, because in that short story you just open on this town controlled by this little boy. There's no visitors, you're just there. In this, it's a school teacher traveling through, and you kind of see it through her eyes, and I didn't even kind of realize what I was watching, which is pretty impressive because I've seen that episode quite a few times. So it was a really cool reveal how they did that, and it's probably my favorite segment because I don't really like things that are direct remakes. It's just like, what's the point? Why don't I just watch the original? What are you trying to do with this? And at least I think Joe Dante came about this in the right way, where he's doing something different with it, and he's found a different way to tell the story. Is the only one that, to me, he kind of found a way to really work and made a little sense that he remade it, even though I still think the original one's better. George Miller then did Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which is probably maybe the best Twilight Zone episode. I'm not a Twilight Zone expert, but it's certainly one of the more famous ones. That one was just too kind of close to the original. He definitely does it in a really exciting George Miller way with a lot of quick cutting. At the time, he had just come out The Road Warrior, or Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, and it definitely reflects the director he was at the time, and it's kind of interesting how he did it, and kind of gets it to work a lot better than Spielberg's segment, frankly, but it really pales in comparison. And because it's so close, I think when you make things so closely to the original, it's hard not to compare them, because you're like, oh yeah, I saw this scene before and it was better, so like, what are you doing? When you have these bigger directors doing them, it feels like this is something they're not as passionate about. This isn't a whole movie, it's not going to take as long. They're like, yeah, whatever, I don't know. Just didn't feel like none of their hearts were in it that much, and I kind of don't get what the whole flow of the movie seems a little odd to me. Like, why have Richard Matheson involved in so many, but then not involved in the first one? And then I didn't understand why Kick the Can was in here. The first 2 segments are the most puzzling, and every review is like, how did the biggest 2 directors make the worst 2 segments in this film? And that's pretty surprising. As a whole, this film has bigger problems, which is that it doesn't have a real reason to exist. If you look at something like Grindhouse, or you look at Creepshow, or you look at other things like that, they're original stories, it's different, you kind of have a theory behind it. And this theory is just, let's remake Twilight Zone episodes that you love. It's the exact same story, but directed by these newer directors. I don't really get the point of that at all. I guess it was just like brand recognition, and that's what they did accomplish. This film apparently didn't bomb. It didn't do as well as they thought it would, but I think all the negative press from the Vic Morrow helicopter accident certainly couldn't have helped, and it opened like 4th or something like that, and I think they thought it would be a new franchise. The only part that I really got into was the It's a Good Life by Joe Dante, because I felt like he had an idea behind it, and he had a good take on that story that made it different. And if you're coming at a story from a different angle, that's when a remake really works. There's a reason The Magnificent Seven is looked at fondly and films like Let Me In and Oldboy aren't, because why would you want to see an exact carbon copy but crappier and more American? That doesn't make very much sense. And this is just, oh, it's crappier and newer. The problem with this isn't that it's an anthology film, is that having directors remake Twilight Zone episodes is not really that appealing. And maybe, I don't know why I thought it would be something different or maybe more interesting. I didn't really realize they would even want to remake Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Like, why would you want to remake that? That episode is perfect. But, you know, I guess they did, and you get this. So, you know, I wondered why nobody plays this or talks about this anymore, and this film answered that question very well for me, and I will never question it again and probably never think about or see this movie, but I will watch those original Twilight Zone episodes. So if you have seen Twilight Zone the movie and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments. And thank you for watching. I had a good time being a guest contributor for the Movie Reviewers 100. If you have not subscribed to this channel already, please do so, and please check out my channel at youtube.com/JimGisrael. There will be a link below in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and come back next time.